The meeting of the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee is now in session. It is Wednesday, September 26th. We're at the Charlton Middle School, and it is 7 p.m., and we will all stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our regular meeting of Wednesday, September 12th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
I have three.
Okay.
One's on the top of page 3. Very first paragraph about the decrease of 120 students, but an increase of 377. I would like added that Mrs. Cabala questioned how that could be if there's a decrease with an increase. The numbers did not make sense. And it was supposed to be, that would be checked out. Remember? Because that's a swing of 500
Right.
people, really. If one's a negative, that's 500 differences. Something's wrong with those numbers, so I'd asked for a check on that.
Yeah, that's incorrect.
Yeah, something's wrong. I think what happened is she counted the kindergarten twice or something. On page 7H. Talking about the superintendent search, I would like to add at the end that Mrs. Cabala felt strongly that any internal candidate should automatically be placed in the finalist category. That would be under H on page 7, about the superintendent search. It should be automatically in the be a finalist. Any internal candidate should automatically be a finalist in the search. I think the committee kind of agreed, but there was no formal vote or anything on that, but I just like it noted that I said that. And then my last one, it's kind of it's on page 8, the second paragraph. It said, Mrs. Cabral said the children would be enrolled for 1 year. I think it should be if the teacher is not rehired in 2019, because it sounds like we're kicking the kids out. That was about the extended employment teacher. Even if the children were here, he would have to stay in the system to stay the next year. Okey-dokey. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so with those corrections, and then Sandy, you can give us the numbers, once they're corrected. With the corrections that Catherine made, we'll take a vote.
Yeah, you
Okay,
have a few corrections.
all right. I'm sorry, Elaine, I didn't
That's
see
okay.
that.
I know it's hard with the angle, so. To page 3, with the discussion on the opening of schools principals report, I would like it noted under the second paragraph that I made a statement that the budget presentation for CES for the upcoming year should be planned accordingly to allow for the increased enrollments that Mrs. Pacheco's been experiencing for the last 4 years. And then going to the conversation regarding the consideration for the non-student enrollment that Mrs. Cabala was just speaking with. I'd like it also reflected that I stated that it was a contradiction to both our policy and our teacher's contract.
Okay, anyone else? All right, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the executive session on Wednesday, September 12th. Do I have a motion?
Motion, so moved. Or second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. Approval of the warrants. We do have warrants this evening to be signed. Citizens Forum, anyone this evening? Okay. Communications, Dr. Nash? None? And I don't have any. How about our members? Any? Okay. Superintendent's report, special topics report, technology update. Dr. Nash, you can speak to it
Sure,
first.
thank you. This evening, my special topics report really includes two presentations by two members of our administrative team. And so I'm going to be very brief this evening, other than to say, by way of introduction, certainly the committee is aware more than I am with respect to the strategic plan that you have been involved in and engaged in. And part of our retreat this summer, administrative retreat, enabled us to hone in on the administrative plan and to really look at those particular goals that would provide action steps that would have impact on student achievement. And universally, the administrative team selected two goals that I've noted for you, in particular the project-based learning, which, as you will hear from our STEAM director, has great impact, potential of great impact on higher order thinking skills, student engagement, inquiry-based learning, and all of that. So we wanted to update you, given the fact that as an administrative team in August, we wanted to strongly focus as this being our significant initiative, along with one of the other initiatives that at the elementary level, response to intervention, or MTSS, that we wanted to talk about. This evening, we want to give you really an opportunity to hear from Karen and to listen to what the district has begun to do, our implementation, our timeline for the year with respect to project-based learning across the district. So without any further ado, I'll introduce our STEAM director, Karen Aries.
So in your packet, I just put a slideshow. I'm just gonna go over like a timeline. Oops. I think I can do it with this. Just advance. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. So if we back up in your packet, you had a presentation. That was just like handouts from the teacher presentation that we gave, all the principals gave to their faculty on September 17th, which was the first full faculty meeting this year. So as Dr. Nash said, we focused on our administrative retreat this and kind of honed in on our beliefs and for our kids and for our strategic plan. And really project-based learning came into the focus. So basically this year, behind our professional development for project-based learning, we have 3 basic objectives, which are that the teachers will learn the goals behind project-based learning. They're going to learn how to develop a project-based learning unit, and teachers will work in teams to develop at least one project-based learning unit or lesson to implement in their classroom this year. Basically starting to dip our toes in slowly. So just kind of a timeline. At the administrative retreat in August, we honed in on that. We focused in on our goals. September 17th, we shared just a really nice common goal with all our faculty, with a nice common message to the teachers about what this year's focus would be, and you have that presentation in your packet. So from there, I basically formed a project-based learning implementation team, which consists of about 35 teachers. So select teachers from each school. So basically, I am training them, and we are going through what it means to focus on project-based learning, and how to develop a unit. So we started that work last Friday on our half professional development day, and we're going to finish that tomorrow morning here at Charlton Middle School. The idea being that then on October 5th, our first full day of professional development, that those teachers from the implementation team will take this message and do these same exercises with their staff at their building, and be engaged in really brainstorming what units and what common units that they can work on this year. through that, through October to January, we hope to have these same continuous messages and updates at faculty meetings. I'm going to be a support person, then the implementation team will be reaching out to me so I can work with them at department meetings, PLCs, grade level meetings, etc. through that period of time. And then January 18th, which is our next half a day, all the teachers will be focused on working again, kind of honing in, finalizing their lessons, getting ready for potential implementation in the spring. I think there's going to be a lot of project-based learning going on in the spring, as everyone's going to be focused in on what exactly they want to do. That's the plan. March, we're going to kind of assess where we are between January and March about where our faculty is, what we think we might want to focus on in March. I'm kind of having thoughts right now about like a professional development where they are immersed in project-based learning themselves, like being in the role of a student as they learn through that process. And then kind of having a share out of the different units between the different grades, where what they're going to do. And then April to June, potentially, rolling out those lessons in the classrooms. We have lots of excited teachers who are really embracing this. I also did a little mini, I would say, session this summer. We had about 6 teachers who took a first little jump into it this summer with some professional development. They're on the team as well. So it's very exciting. You know, there's different realms of expertise on the group as well. So basically, that's kind of the plan. In June, we'll follow up with the whole team, kind of assess where we are, what our next steps are, and assess that next summer. It's basically a multi-phase project as we kind of look at, you know, rethinking some of the ways that we implement teaching in the classroom. So that's kind of the plan.
Great.
With all different units, the big 5, as Ms. Martin-Rosen would say, plus a couple more in unified arts as well. So.
Any questions?
Yep.
Elaine?
That may have answered my question, but I was wondering if with your 35-member implementation team, are we representing all
Oh yeah.
areas? So
Yep.
I know that one of the conferences that we had attended, MASC, was really where they were turning around and showing how you overlap teaching English through another subject, or teaching, one of the ones that stood out was teaching chemistry through dance. So I'm just, in project-based learning, I know that the foundation of that is hands-on, but I'm wondering whether or not we're really integrating subject matter, so subjects are not standing in isolation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the goal eventually. Right now, we're, you know, like I
Right.
said, dipping our toes in. Some of the units that were created over the summer are definitely like ELA and math, ELA and social studies, you know, at that more elementary level. So, yep,
Awesome.
we have all different areas covered. So, well, excited to bring you back an update as we go.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Good job. And then we have our Technology Director, Dan D'Angelo. Update?
So I just wanted to give you a quick update on the network cable project that's been going on. As of now, we have 4 buildings that are completely done out of the 6. They haven't started the other 2 yet. They're going to be starting Mason Road on Monday. And then Dudley Elementary School will be the last building to go. For Mason Road, they're going to be doing after-hour work. It's going to be basically like 3:15 or so to around 11. So they'll get that done at nighttime. Try to stay out of the way of the kids and whatnot during the day. So far, everything seems to be going pretty well. You know, we've had no major issues at the buildings. At the other 4 buildings we did. All 4 buildings had internet on the first day of school, so that was at least good. that's pretty much it as far as the wiring job goes itself. We have a couple of things left on the punch list for the first 4 buildings. The punch list is probably about 95% complete. Arcus, the cable company, will come back out to finish the last couple of items. The only thing left at those buildings would just be the air conditioning to cool the rooms.
So we'll have Wi-Fi in all the buildings?
Yeah, you already had wireless in all the buildings. This
But some
basically,
didn't.
well, this replaced the switches
Yeah.
and all the cables. You had, you were putting access points into buildings that had cables that were 20 years old. In addition to this project, the cabling, we replaced all the switches at those buildings, and we added additional access points, so there would be more coverage at some of these buildings as well, actually at all the buildings. We're still in the process of reconfiguring switches and messing around with those. We were just trying to get the buildings up and running. We
And how
didn't really
about
have a
cell
lot of that.
phones? Do they all work in all the buildings? or-
Cell phones can connect to the guest wireless. As far as cell phone coverage, that's
Yeah,
a
you
totally
still
different thing.
won't. You
Yeah,
have
that
to-
has nothing to do with this. That would be
No,
like,
I know,
yeah.
but are we ever going to,
A different building, maybe.
Yeah, this building here had repeaters put in up and down the center of the building. If you go out to the wings, you still can't get cell coverage.
yeah?
Most of the
Sometimes
buildings,
that's dangerous, though, if you need your cell.
yeah, most of the buildings do have that issue where they have dead spots. They're built like bunkers, and honestly, at this rate,
You can't get it.
yeah, even just driving down the roads at this point, a lot of roads in the last, say, 6 to 8 months have gone from having, a dead spot for a few hundred yards to you have no coverage in the entire road. So whether or not they shut down cell towers here or there, I don't
Yeah.
know on that.
No, I know that didn't have anything to
yeah.
do with it, but,
But it would definitely be helpful. I mean, just trying to do this project here where you were taking down the entire network, so you couldn't communicate that way, and you had bad cell coverage, made it very difficult to communicate with other members of my team to get certain
Right.
things done. So yeah, we do have, like I said, the other 2 buildings. We're hoping Mason Road will be done in about 3 weeks. Normally, it would probably have been 2 to 2.5. It's probably going to be closer to 3, 3.5, just because they're going to be working at nighttime and not just gutting the entire building. They're going to be trying to keep, rooms up and running and doing a few rooms a night and whatnot. Dudley Elementary School, they haven't even looked at yet, to be honest with you. We have everything all mapped out and everything, but right now the focus is to get one building done and then move on to the next building.
So because the project extended into the school year, obviously, we're working with the 2 principals to identify strategically the best time. Obviously, we're starting at the close of the day and extending that probably a little bit later in the evening to try to get that done and to have least interruption. Also, the principals have worked and will work as they continue to look at what clusters of rooms, based on what's happening in the building at this time of year, need to be identified. One of the things, though, I want to make sure that I believe that we're clear about is that we're doing 6 of the 7 buildings. So
Correct.
at this point in time, can you address the issue that we'll have with respect to the fact that the bid came in a little bit lower than anticipated?
Yep.
And the funding that you anticipate will be left, and how we're going to use that, or potentially the use at the high school?
Sure. Yeah, the bid came in far lower than what we had expected. We actually used the bids that we submitted, that we received through E-rate the year before from the same vendor.
yeah, because we had put aside 100,000, right?
No, it was a little over $1 million.
Oh,
$1,006,000,
okay, I'm sorry, a
yeah.
million.
Add a 0.
But, not 0.
Yeah.
So you did spend, what, 600,000 was the bid? I
As of,
meant to say a million.
as of now, yeah, I mean, we have around 230,000 left.
Oh, you do?
Obviously, there are 2 buildings left and anything can come up, but nothing that's going to be major. So we do have that amount of money, roughly that amount of money left, that we can put towards a Shepherd Hill rewiring job. I mean, as I said before, Shepherd Hill, Charlton L, and Heritage were the 3 buildings that were in the most need for this. The cable's 20-something years old, run by volunteers. It wasn't good cable to start with. So Shepherd Hill definitely does need to be done. And as part of that project, again, we'll be replacing the switches as well as adding some additional access points.
What's the estimated amount for Shepherd Hill then?
Shepherd Hill is just a guess at this point because, again, going off of what that company gave to us last year and then what actually came in,
Right.
it was crazy. I don't anticipate us getting such a discount this time. They severely underbid the job.
Okay.
So, I'm looking at if we could do it for, say, 220 or so,
Yeah.
220, 225. We have that amount to cover the wiring. There's still about another 45,000 or so for electronics, so the switches and the access points and whatnot, and then to cool an area as well. So that's some additional money we would have to come up with.
So is the 200,000 before E-rate reimbursement?
That would be the cost of the project, and then you
No, I'm
have.
saying, I'm sorry, Dan, at this point, we had $1 million that was
Yep.
part of the override money that was set aside to do these, all of the schools,
Yep.
excluding, I believe, maybe I'm wrong, the high school.
Correct.
You've spent about 600,000?
Yeah, we have,
So you have 400,000 left,
well,
correct?
we have, let me see, we have about 230,000 left
Okay.
out of what we've spent
Okay.
or what is earmarked to be spent
Okay.
on this project, on these six
For
buildings.
6 schools?
For the 6 schools,
Okay.
correct. That does not, that's out of the $1 million
Yeah.
that was from the override.
Okay.
That doesn't take into account the, I believe it's like 230 or so, 230,000 that would be getting back from
Back
the
for
E-rate. That's going to be
E-rate.
going
Okay, that's what
towards
I'm looking for.
something
yeah,
else.
that's what I
Okay.
thought.
All right. So
Right.
So there's
over
400,
Right.
over
Right.
400,000.
Well, right, I mean, as far as for this particular project, we're looking at just the 2 and change or whatnot. I believe the E-rate money coming back was gonna be going towards other things. I don't know what that would be
I
going
think the
towards.
intent probably was to replenish E&D,
Mm-hmm.
but if we're looking at trying to get the high school project done, and we may need, 50,000, there may be a sense that we should get that done
Well,
at
keep
this
in,
point in time.
yeah, keep in mind too
Use
that,
some of that.
we'll be eligible for about 106,000 worth of reimbursement for Shepherd Hill as well.
Right, so
that's-
in essence, it will pay for itself.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking for another 50,
Right.
If we could,
Okay.
if
Right.
you
It
could
was
put that money
so
towards it or
And you
operating
still be able
funds or
to
whatnot.
Put some of that E-rate
Right,
money
yeah.
into E&D, yeah.
Right, as part of this project, we've replaced some of the core switches at the high school, or we are in the process of replacing the core switches, so when next summer rolls around, if this project goes through, it's relatively simple as far as the electronics go, we're just adding a few extra stacks to it, so that cuts down on the cost of next year because we're able to do some of the stuff this year.
Dan, can you just explain in a very general sense how E-rate reimbursement works? Is a life expectancy, and, when you get that reimbursement, how does that work? It's based on what?
When you get the reimbursement,
Through E-rate, when you're sending, is the expectation that there's a life expectancy for what you put in for 3 to 5 years,
well, yeah, I mean, they tell you that.
the reimbursement?
You can't file for E-rate reimbursements if, obviously, you have a building scheduled to be demoed. The way the E-rate reimbursement works is, even though as a district you get so much money back, or you're eligible to file for so much, it's broken down by school, so you can't just kind of take it all and put it in one building. So Shepherd Hill would be getting, if we were to use all the funds, Shepherd Hill would get 106,000 back next year as part of this project, or just in reimbursement on this project. But that's something that, should we decide that, we're gonna be knocking down Shepherd Hill and building a new building, that's something that, we're not supposed to be submitting for that. Now, if we decide, if we file for it now and then a year later, it's decided that they're gonna demo the building, it's already been done. It's just a matter of deciding at that point, if you know there's something coming up in the future, as far as like a renovation or whatnot, do you just wait and make it part of that renovation, or do you do it now? That's kind of been the conversation, I think, since I've been here for about 11 years. It's always been, well, let's wait for the renovation, when, and it hasn't come, so.
Well, a renovation project may not necessarily deal with technology.
Right.
Because you need it doesn't mean that they identify it as a need. A complete new build is going to give you X amount of dollars per student for technology typically. MSBA used to set a rate of $1,200 per student. It's probably changed since the time that I was involved, but I don't believe, unless the renovation would include, it doesn't include the infrastructure piece of the technology, it's at least my understanding, but.
Yeah, it just, I guess it depends on how it's filed. There was discussion before of doing a renovation of the existing building and possibly an addition, and then
Right.
obviously you'd have to have
So in new,
new
it
stuff
would-
for that.
In new, you would,
Correct, right, I just don't know, I know at one point there was talk of just having a consultant take a look at everything and try to see what the needs were. At that point, I think everyone would determine what is
so
needed.
moving forward, given the fact that at this point in time, there is no MSBA project in the wings, and there is no SOI on the radar, is the anticipation that we are going to this year move forward to commit the 200,000 needed to complete the work at the high school?
That would be my plan. I mean, like I said,
I
you
just
know,
wanted the committee
yeah.
members, to have an opportunity to speak to that one way or
See
the
who's
other.
getting the money.
yeah, given that the original amount was, we're looking at that original amount to just rewire the buildings and not even do switches. We got the switches done as well, and again, the 3 buildings that needed it the most are, one of them.
Two of the
so
three
Two will be done, correct, and one of them really, really does need it, and looking
So
at
in
a building.
essence, we do have like $430,000 to work with.
Right.
Okay.
Eventually, yeah.
Through the chair,
Eventually.
my question would be, we didn't plan on doing Shepherd Hill immediately. Is the plan now that we would be considering
I think that's a
moving
discussion I'd like to
quicker
have with the
forward?
committee, knowing
Right.
that your bid was a little
Yeah,
bit lower,
Right.
whether that's the
We
next.
can do it now.
Right.
Right, and like I said, originally, it wasn't even gonna be the switches, we would have to deal with the switches as
Right.
well. The
Mhm.
fact that we're able to get all that done, and now we have some money, even if it's not enough to cover the entire project, it's.
Through E-rate. you
It's a
would-
good amount.
you would
Right.
be able to
If you use some of
recapture that,
that,
though.
correct.
Because we
yes.
dedicated the $1
Right,
million
right.
override to
Correct.
technology.
To network infrastructure, correct.
With the, if I'm correct, and just bear with me, so the plan was to do the original $1 million, we were gonna put Shepherd Hill onto the plan for the following year. Mr. Valley, am I correct? And then with the fact that the money has come in so favorable to us right now, we could move forward with this project, and the E-rate reimbursement coming back would help us cover the additional costs that we're coming for, if you could just clarify.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we ever made a commitment to doing Shepherd Hill next year,
Mhm.
but certainly the intention was, once we had the E-rate reimbursement from the initial $1 million investment for the 6 schools, there would be seed money to have that conversation. I think there's still a key discussion point about Shepherd Hill, and I think it's inevitable that we'll end up in the same building that we're currently in, whether or not it's completely renovated or expanded or whatever. I don't think a new building is in the offing unless we get, a Hail Mary from MSBA and actually have some level of funding commitment from the state. Given the fact that the bids did come in some, lower, and that we can afford to do Shepherd Hill, it certainly makes a lot of sense, unless we want to keep kicking that can down the road. But at some point in time, we do have to make a decision. The committee has to make a decision, the communities have to make a decision, that we're going to make the investments in improving Shepherd Hill, because just delaying isn't buying us anything.
Now, would you be able to do that this year? Do you have to wait till next summer because of the bids and so
Well,
forth?
what has to happen is, if we're gonna file for E-rate reimbursement to be able to get that extra 106,000 back, we have to start submitting the E-rate stuff soon. Doesn't have to be right now, but I have received my E-rate packet about 2 to 3 weeks ago. So we normally file for Category 1, which would be our internet and connectivity and whatnot. Category 2 would be for the wiring and switches and that type of stuff. They have very hard deadlines now. They've implemented actual deadlines, whereas in the past they've been kind of floating deadlines. So we have a couple of months before we absolutely have to make a decision. The
But would
sooner
we
the
be
better,
better to
obviously.
bid Now, when the bids were good, maybe we'd have to go out a bid again. wouldn't
Yes,
we?
we do all the bidding through E-rate. We file everything
Okay,
through them.
okay.
For now, we basically have to be able to tell them, we want to move forward with it. We don't have to
Mhm.
give them all of the information. I mean, I have to go through and we have to do up all the wiring maps. We have to do all that stuff. And like I said, we're trying to get the other 2 buildings
The high
done.
school was never part of the initial
No,
project,
we
because
did
you
it.
thought it would cost you $1 million to do all 6 schools.
Correct. We did a walkthrough at the high school a few years ago and came up with some numbers back then, but
Right,
it's,
right.
things have
So you'd
changed
have
so
to go
much at the high
back,
school,
but-
yeah. So we'll have to go through and do that, but they don't need all of that stuff for probably another 6 or 7 weeks. But sooner rather than later, we're gonna have to at least be able to say, are we planning on submitting for this or not submitting for this?
So I think what I'm looking
No.
for
I
is
think we
some
should make a
direction
motion
from
tonight.
Yeah.
the
I
school
would make a
committee.
motion that we pursue doing Shepherd Hill as soon as possible and file the necessary papers.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, the way E-rate works would be, obviously, if you have the funding, you could start the work as early as April 1st. Obviously, it would be after that, after MCAS and whatnot. The fact that we have this money from the override from
Right.
this year means we don't have to wait till July 1st,
Right.
Right.
because that ends up being a major issue, not being able to start till July 1st,
Right.
and
So
order stuff
given-
till July 1st.
Given the timeframe, just so that I understand, you wouldn't be able to, I know that you've got a file, because this wasn't on the initial part of the documents that were filed for the 6 schools, not the 7. So that timeframe would push you still to April to actually start a project?
Yes, because last year's E-rate, that's closed, so
Okay.
this would be an
All right.
entire E-rate
So you'd have to
submission.
be applying under the new E-rate?
Correct, and if that goes through,
Yeah,
then as long as you have the funds, April 1st is when you could start.
okay.
Again,
Given the
really
fact we
should be
wouldn't
a-
have to go out now, because we'd have some money, I get it,
Mhm.
okay.
Now, do I have a second to Catherine's? Okay, any more discussion on it? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
We're lucky the bids were so low.
Low,
We were really
that,
lucky.
I mean, that was quite a
Well, I
bit of
think
money.
as
said,
Rich
I'm not
pointed out,
expecting
we
it this
may
year.
not get
Well,
that
Well, at least
through the next
fix
one,
them.
because I think timing is everything, and I
Right.
think the company probably underbid,
Yeah.
as he indicated, underbid the project.
Right.
I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
45% below.
Right,
So it's
Wow.
very,
You know, part of it just comes in the whole competitive process, and that
Correct.
they've encouraged to do this on another level, so. yeah.
Right.
Good.
And,
Thank you for all your work.
Good,
Thank
that's
you.
good work.
so, we've still got some, couple to finish, but we'll get them done.
yeah, we'll get them done.
We'll move on.
Thank you,
All right.
Dan.
All right.
Okay, that brings us to new business.
Actually, no, I have a
Oh,
couple more
oh, I'm
items under my.
sorry.
No, that's okay. Wanted to talk about, going back
You
related.
know what, right, we should have had the superintendent's report separate.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay,
I'd like to, in my special topics report, I did put this in because it really is something that needs to be discussed, and I'm looking for a vote this evening. I'm requesting that the school committee would approve $1,500 to be used to partially fund the after-school science club fair stipends at both the middle schools and the high school, so 3 positions. In the past, these were funded under grant funds that were available. Those funds have kind of dissipated and gone away over the last couple of years, and we're unable to totally fund these positions. So we're looking for a partial funding. These are not positions that are currently in the collective bargaining agreement, Appendix A, potentially discussion that may preclude the negotiating team to have. And I'm looking for $1,500. Our Director of Finance has identified that in our stipend line items, typically, stipend line, we fund these positions, and sometimes they come in at different scale, if you will. So we should have the $1,500 available. Karen, again, is here this evening. If you have any questions specifically about the need for these, I have a copy. I did not give it to you of really the duties, but I can go over that if you'd like.
well,
But I
this
would-
was, the stipends were grant-funded before, right?
They were grant-funded totally, and now they just can only be partially funded, and we do not know what will happen next year, so.
So I'll entertain a motion to approve the stipends for $1,500. Do I have a second? Who?
I'll do something.
Okay. Any discussion, any more
Yeah,
discussion?
go ahead.
Elaine?
Should we qualify that it's for this year?
Yes,
Because
Yes.
we will be
right,
moving forward.
right. They are not
Correct.
part of our
We'll add
collective
that
bargaining
to the
agreement at this
motion for
point.
this year.
And they are
for the year,
$1,000 stipends, just for
School year
clarification each.
2018, 2019.
My
Kathy?
question was, whenever we do this, we always go talk to the union to make sure that, because we shouldn't be just adding stipends left and right. We always have approval from this
Yeah,
informal
I have.
thing. Have you just spoken
Yes,
with?
I have, and Kevin is here, and when we met, maybe in August, we talked about it, and he was
It's all good.
fine with it. and
Okay,
It'll probably come up as part of our
okay, as long as, because
discussion.
we always get
Yep.
kind of a talk.
No,
Okay,
we did, thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you. Also, you have 2 student notifications. A student who was a 9th grade student suspended for 10 days for possession and under the influence of prescription pills while on school grounds. And I am pleased to announce that beginning October 10th school committee meeting, our student rep will be Kaylee O'Brien. She's a member of the Shepherd Hill Regional High School Student Advisory Committee, and what has been selected as the student rep to the school committee. So I anticipate that she'll be joining us October 10th. She's also a well, I can't say that, but she is a member of the Superintendent Advisory Committee too, I believe. So she's going to be busy.
Yeah. So does this conclude?
This
the
concludes
super-
my special topics report. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to new business, policy review subcommittee timeline. And Dr. Nash?
Yes, thank you. So I have put in your packet a draft of a timeline along with identification of the suggested policies that the Policy Review Subcommittee begin to meet to review. This document is, I do not take credit for this document. I would thank the former superintendent who put this document together, and we really updated it. My administrative assistant really did that work in updating it. I know that it had been something proposed last year, but I believe, it's my understanding, that there were many other things more pressing for you, so you put it aside. We have two members, in addition to myself, who will be working, Mrs. Rabbit, Mrs. Santoshi, will be working on these. I would suggest that we work to establish a good time to meet and a good day, and just do that on a regular cycle, and then, as proposed in this timeline, come back to you as had been identified in the process for first reading, second reading, and approval. So,
Elaine?
I checked with Mrs. Antossi, and I think both of us would be available to have our first meeting on, I believe it's either October 9th or 11th. And just that you have an availability around 10 o'clock, I think,
Okay.
that either one of those 2 days
Okay.
would work.
all right.
So if you can check
Check,
with
and we'll
that,
get
and
back
then
to you. Yep,
we can set that up.
okay, perfect.
I just have a question, a couple of policies we wanted you to look at first. Remember, I think one was about the student coming from out of town. I think Mrs. Reed wanted you to look at that. Weren't you going to do a few right
I
away?
think we're gonna have to go back through our minutes for the last couple of meetings and add policies that are of an urgent nature.
Right, and that's what I've
Right.
indicated, that this was probably a working document. Look at this and then go back, determine if additional policies need to be added for whatever reason, because partly because they were discussions at this, as the committee has met this year, or because you just feel a need that you
They
wanted
need
to
to
add
move
them.
to-
Right,
So this, we'll use this as a guideline, because it just takes us through
Right.
our whole policy manual, but I think before we set the first meeting, we'll come up with a list of things that need to be addressed. I had actually noted regarding the school lunch policy that MASC has been sending the notices out in,
Right.
whether or not we were in
Right,
compliance
right.
with that.
We may want to look at that to see.
Might want to
yeah.
look at that one as
Right.
well.
Okay.
Okay.
That- Yes. Okay.
Next, Director in Finance and Operations report, Mr. Matthew.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit of business for the committee this evening. We do have some donations. Heritage Elementary received a donation of 4 gift cards for Staples, totaling $250, intended for school supplies. The Quo Vadis Club of Webster Dudley donated $3,000 to support the annual First Honors Recognition Dinner at Shepherd Hill, held last week. Shepherd Hill also received a donation of stainless steel counters and casters worth an estimated $790 from the Shepherd Hill Booster Club for the athletic complex field house. And Charlton Elementary received a donation of $108 from Planet Aid. I'd ask the committee to accept these donations.
I'll entertain a motion to accept the donations that Mr. Matthew has stated.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Following up on our last meeting, included in the packet was the hiring analysis budget impact as compared to the one presented last time, which was just a listing of positions and salaries. The big difference here is if we knew that somebody was planning on retiring when we prepared the budget, we obviously tried to recognize those savings then and put in a placeholder salary amount. As you can see, the principals continue to do very good job of replacing staff with an eye to the bottom line. The process, shows a rather large savings, a good portion of which was committed at the June meeting to increase the FTEs for the speech and language pathologists in the district, and the rest of the funds were eaten up by the need to hire additional instructional assistants brought forward to the committee over the summer. So while this looks good, we have, instead of saving this money, actually made these commitments. So from the salary perspective, it ends up being a net wash. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions on the chart or in the concepts. Seeing none, the last thing I have for the committee this evening is the emergency door locking mechanisms that are at the schools and the classrooms. As indicated in the memo, the district did receive a directive from the Town of Dudley Building Inspector to remove these locks on the egress doors within 45 days of receipt, citing Massachusetts Building Code IBC 780 CMR, Section 110.1.9.5, specifically as it relates to unlatching. Dr. Nash and I did meet with the building inspector and fire departments over the last 2 days, both in Dudley and in Charlton, along with Principal Packard, to review the order and review the circumstances and possible remedies. This secondary latching mechanism basically consists of some hardware on the door and a pin that goes in there. The directive for the immediate time frame is to simply remove the latching pin from the classroom. The doors will still lock through the normal door handle locks, but the secondary mechanism will be removed for now. And I think one of the topics for the security task force that was formed will be whether or not to enter into an appeal process with these or figure out what the path forward is on these.
Now, does every school have the notification yet?
No, we just
Oh.
had our meeting today, and actually, we had it here, and so that's why our principal is here. I'll be meeting with all the principals next week. At our regular meeting, we'll disseminate all of that information to ensure that we
So
all
it'll
do
be
it in a
next
consistent
week, yeah,
pattern.
so-
And we did speak with the chiefs today, and actually a Charlton chief, and they were fine with us waiting until next week to do this. Just want to make sure people understand, our doors still lock. This
Oh,
is a
right,
secondary
that's the
mechanism,
one.
an additional mechanism that has been deemed under the state building code to be something that needs to be removed. So we're not removing all of it, we're just really
Removing
taking
the pin.
taking the pin and storing it, putting it in a safe spot so that it's not able to be used.
Is it important to clarify that those were pins that were obtained in order to respond to the emergency situations that the schools were responding to regarding school shootings and intrusions, was to provide a secondary safety system for school classrooms?
Not being here, I really couldn't answer the reason why.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that it was a response to an attempt to make rooms more secure.
Safer.
And give an additional sense of security by having this locking mechanism.
And that's similar
Right.
to, like, your sliding glass door, you have that mechanism for security. The door locks, but
Except
then
you're
when
not
you
in a
step
public
it down.
building. You're in your own home,
Yeah.
as long as you don't
No,
feel
I
it,
know,
right.
but it's similar to
Right.
that, so it makes it safer for the,
Yeah.
Could you explain for the general why it's being pulled out? What's the problem?
Yeah.
You know, why is it wrong to have that? I mean, we discussed it at the meeting the other day, but could you explain?
You want to explain or you want me to? So egress.
As my understanding of the situation is, the doors are supposed to open to allow egress with one simple motion, as described to us, basically with a closed fist.
Right.
right.
So that there's no need for secondary tools, secondary motions. Everything is done in one motion, understandable to virtually everybody, no matter what grade level they're in.
And is it have to pull out a pin first?
Right.
With these, you would have to
Right.
pull that out.
Why
So-
would they have made those? I mean, why did we put those in to begin with? Who advised us on that? Do you
I
know?
don't know. I
I'm not
kinda
asking
can't
you.
answer that.
I'm asking Mr. Beth, you know why we did that? Who advised us?
Again, I think it was a logical step forward in terms of trying to provide another level of safety. I don't think it was, I'm not sure it was an issue until it was an issue, and I kind of hate when you have that doublespeak, but I think this was a topic raised at the state level recently, and it became more of a viable topic and concern for folks as more and more schools started to implement them. And, you know, obviously, when our building inspectors do their walkthroughs here and the fire people they noticed them before, and, you know, now that the state is making an issue of it, they're doing their jobs by letting us know that, you know, there's a violation. But that's why there is an appeal process, and even the building inspector in Charlton today pointed out the fact that the state of Ohio, their legislature overrode the fire marshals and building inspectors' recommendations in that state to allow these. So that's why we don't want to remove all of the hardware at this point in time. We want to eliminate the violation by removing the pin, and then see where the course takes us.
Okay, thanks.
When I look at, say, the library, there's so many doors you'd have to pin if there was a shooter coming in. I mean, maybe that's dangerous to do. Somebody's got to run around and pin all these doors, right? So,
Through the chair, I think that the danger from the building and fire code is more, that's a very specific reason to have it, but what is the danger if a fire were to occur?
you can't get out, and the kids won't know how to do this.
It's just a
It's a
secondary
Right.
It's two
exit.
steps in the
Right.
process of getting.
Right,
to it.
and
So the
that's-
code specifically
yeah.
says one exit,
And
and
that's
that's
good.
two.
If there's no other discussion on this topic, I am complete this evening.
Thank you. Budget and Finance Subcommittee report, and that's Elaine.
With the recent package, you'll see the inclusion of the budget and finance minutes. As they're approved, they'll be released with the packet. I have nothing new to add, other than I know that Dr. Nash and Mr. Matthew have been working with the, as we called it at the last time, a house doctor to come in to assist us with the capital planning. And I don't know if Mr. Matthew wants to give you a little bit of an update, but I know that that work is underway. And probably at the next meeting, next budget and finance meeting, that's what we will be discussing. And we'll come back to you with anything at that point in time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? All right, that brings us up to superintendent search process update, NESDEC and / MASC. Vote may be required, so we did meet at 5 this evening, and we did meet with the representatives from NESDEC and MASC, and we heard what they had to offer. So now it's up for discussion to see if we want help from either one of the organizations. So who would like to start? Anyone?
Okay.
Okay.
I appreciated that they both came in. I appreciate that you set up for them to both come in. I thought that it was useful for us to hear the different types of things they could offer to us. I personally felt that the MASC committee, or I guess process, seemed more at home to my way of thinking how it would move forward. I thought that they offered a lot of services that didn't cost any money, and maybe that's something for us to consider. But I did think that they seemed to have a connection to New England, and I thought that I felt more in tune with what the suggestions that he had put forth.
Anyone else?
I have a question
Go
for
ahead.
you to Elaine. Elaine, as both you and Stephanie were on the search committee process, what are you feeling comfortable with from what your experience was?
Well,
I'm sorry for
Stephanie and
the
I
question.
served on both of the last two searches. So
Okay.
the full search that we did when we were replacing Superintendent Gilrain and when we were doing the interim search. In both of those searches that we did on our own, it is a very intensive, extensive process. It's a large time commitment. I think that it would be helpful to have guidance and support. And I think that there are elements of what the both presentations included that I think would be important to include in our process going forward, which were not part of our last two processes. So I know that in our conversation, we kind of looked at the option of taking parts of what was offered and not all of what was offered. So some of the things that Mr. Kuchar brought forward from MASC were things that we tapped into when we were doing the interim search. So I did reach out to him. We did have the templates that they used for questions. He did come out, he did speak to the search committee. We kind of outlined all of that. And I think that that's a good basis to start. I think that there would be things that, I guess if you're looking at things that I felt were not as smooth for the search committee that I would be looking for support with, I can just turn around and tell you both searches were very, very big time commitments on the part of school committee members to do those searches. And I think it's good to have that counsel from outside. We do have an advantage, you know, with Dr. Nash being here and having served, you know, in the capacity to help us. It's a different field. Prior to were people that were leaving and moving on to another venture. And I think Dr. Nash is going to be able to give us some perspective as well as having been through more situations. So I think that there's a level of support that's needed. How much support that the committee agrees is necessary is, I think, what's at question.
And Elaine, what do you, what's your opinion? Do you think the free services are enough because you were on the search committee and you did ask for his help? Or are you looking for us to pay a fee and getting more help?
Here's what I would suggest. I think we really need to have a firmer idea of how we want to move forward. And then when we have an idea of how we move forward, then you can turn around and figure out if there's anything that you're going to need above what we could access for free. I mean, I called Mr. Kuchar quite frequently over the spring as we were navigating through the process, as you know, and he was readily available. But here's one of the things that I didn't find that worked effectively for me as an individual, not for the whole committee, but for me. I found the school spring process of accessing and looking at the documentations not consistent, because it depended on whether or not an applicant chose to input information or they decided to attach information. And not being familiar with the system because I'd never worked it before, there were a lot of places that I missed information initially that I didn't pick up on until multiple steps down the road. I would like to look at that's why I had asked specifically about the template for application. I'd certainly like to have our own home so that the application process is driving the information that we specifically want. There were a lot of questions on when we had to get deeper into the process about whether or not the information that was there was relevant or was there at all. That, I think, in itself would be a process that I'd like to see streamlined. And if that's something that we can obtain through our member services, that's great. I don't think that School Spring is the only place that we should be looking. We didn't access MASS and MASC early enough in the process to have the full range of our listing being up there. whether or not we look for other options for that. I think guidance is very important. It might need to be a little bit higher than what we can obtain for free. I don't necessarily think that, and here's the thing, I just know, having talked to many school committee members when you're out and about, you know, there is that bit of, I liked what NESDEC had to say because they give you everything, and then, you know, I've heard that sometimes things are screened and you don't get everything, so I think that we as a committee should determine, you know, what that final criteria is that we look at.
Anyone else? So,
May I just add one?
next, the first step, should we
So-
form a search committee?
Well,
And then-
here's my
Go ahead.
first thing. If the committee chooses not to go with either, to do the search itself, then typically what happens in districts where I've worked both as a superintendent and also as a member of a school committee, i.e. that you're going to lead the search yourself and use them in whatever capacity you wish to, then typically a member of the school committee is named as the chair of the superintendent search committee. So that would be your first undertaking. And that individual is the go-to person. That's the individual who is your contact with whichever group you use, for whatever capacity, would do all of the work, set the wheels in motion to do that. So it's not, because it is the search of the school committee members, it's not the search of the central office. And so therefore, you'd want to make sure that there would be someone who would be able to commit that time to do that and to lead that process. And I think that would be my recommendation to you. In Oxford, they did an internal search last year. A member of their school committee served and did the chair and chaired it. And the documents that we might need, you know, to be run off were done at the central office by either an administrative assistant to the superintendent or someone else who was available to do that when that became difficult. So my recommendation would be either, you know, to make some determination as to whether, one, you all know your schedules, as to whether one of you is willing and able and has the time to do that, and that may push the decision as to which way you really can go, because, you know, not knowing all of your schedules. So that would be
And-
my sense.
What are we going to do with the search committee? I mean, we have to decide, are we having 2 school committee members? How many administrators?
Typically, once you decide, it can be a discussion that the chair of the search committee would have, would come back and suggest either of the format, the setup of all of your phases, you know, would lead you through that. You would make the determination, obviously, as a school committee, as to the members that you would want, the makeup of that entire committee, what it looks like in the different phases of the search, right down to, of course, when you make that decision and do the final interviews. But, you know, those are, you know, typically decisions that you would turn over to whoever wants to chair and run that, if you don't hire a NESDEC or a MASC.
Can I speak again?
Go ahead.
So I remember, I thought you had said something, Dr. Nash, about typically if we're going to utilize services like an administrative assistant
Yep.
in the central office, we might have to pay money for that, or like how would we, or we would hire somebody outside?
Only if you find that the time frame or the amount of work you want them to do is above and beyond. In some instances, you know, sometimes there's some compensation if someone has to extend their hours. It really depends on how much work. I can tell you that in Oxford, I didn't see that it took a lot of time, and quite frankly, she ended up staying later, but that was her choice to do it. It wasn't, you know, she stayed beyond her work hours to get that work done. She simply didn't want to have it interfere with a regular day. So you may want to compensate someone for that.
My goal for asking that question was, if we're looking at the price point that MASC put forth to us, even if we're putting a little bit of money into it, we could be relatively comparable, and we could get a lot more for the service that they would provide if we're gonna do an external and internal search. That's, could be extensive. I mean, that's a lot of work for any one of us to put our time into. not to say that it isn't worthy, but we're looking for somebody to be long-term. This is not something that we're gonna undertake every year. Maybe we should put money towards it.
I think that's our first decision. Are we going to put money towards it and hire MASC or NESDEC first? Go ahead, Elaine.
Through the chair, I'm going to throw this out as a consideration. I think even if you do your search independently, or you engage either one of the two companies that came tonight, you still need to have a point person from the school committee that's gonna run the
yes.
operation. I think it would make sense, since we heard so much from both parties tonight about surveys, that we put together a survey to kind of outline what people's feelings are about moving the process forward. So some of the things that we heard tonight were obviously developing a candidate profile. You know, we have to kind of figure out whether or not we want to go through the focus group process. How are we looking to access information from administrators, staff, civic leaders, parents, as far as, you know, things that they want us to know about our search, and kind of put together that template, and then from that template, we can figure out what it is that we would be approaching either one of these companies for as potential support, identifying areas that you'd want potential support. That would then turn around and tell you, are those things that we can access through MASC for as part of our membership, or is that something that we would needing to elevate what we access through them if that was the company that you wanted to go for? I mean, economically, they are the least expensive of the two, but both of them did say that they would be willing to just let us choose and select those things that we wanted assistance with. So I don't know if that is a way to move forward. It's really hard to turn around and say what you would be accessing either one of those companies for. We haven't really figured out exactly what we want.
But through the chair, wouldn't we still have to pay them to do the survey?
No, I'm saying
You
that
think
we
that-
would create a survey amongst us and figure out what it is that we want. I mean, it's basically taking their information packets and saying, based on what they presented tonight, you know, do you want to do survey groups? Do you want to do, you know, focus groups? Do you want to do an online survey? Is that something that we can create in-house? I mean, we have a lot of, you know, we have ability to maybe tap into resources internally and then figure out, okay, if we're gonna go forward with these things, are these things that we can do within our own committee? Or will we need to have help to get those things done?
So can I follow up to my question? I thought you were asking for the input from all of these parties, because I'm pretty sure, I would even go so bold to say, there are all of those forums and surveys, people are going to want to have input. I've heard that straight through.
Oh, yeah.
And so to take the time to create a survey to say what kinds of things would you want, when we pretty much know what we're looking for, maybe we skip that point and get right to the survey of what do you feel is most appropriate or important to you in, you know, what are your 3 most important characteristics?
So, I don't, sorry,
Go ahead.
to go through your point. I agree that I think that's gonna be an important element of it. But what I heard from the 2 people that were here tonight was that if they participate in that process, not only are they kind of facilitating and leading those conversations, but they're also taking all of the information and then turning it into something that becomes a workable document for us, that's going to be synthesizing the points that people made. That in itself is a huge task in assessment if you're.
Agreed.
So, you know, is that something that you want to then ask for support? So we would be looking at either one of those groups as, we want you to come in and help us facilitate gathering information from our, you know, our district community and our, you know, town communities, and we want assistance with focus groups, we want assistance with online surveys, we want somebody to compile all of that information, be able to present it back to us. That's a very, you know, tangible thing that we can price out.
I'm ready to say yes to that right now.
okay, so here's the other thing that, I mean, this is why I'm saying that it's a list of things. So we did not utilize a district profile in either of the last two searches, which is, both companies spoke to that tonight. And even though it's an online profile, we should develop an online profile that speaks to who the district is, what their makeup is, what our I think Dr. Nash made the points about, what is our staffing, what is our pupil mix, what is our financial, outlook, what are the characteristics that make the district unique and desirable to want to be here. So we would need to create a profile to attract. So to just put up an ad on School Spring and not be able to validate the reason why we want people to apply for this job, we need to have that done. Is that an expertise that we need to tap into to create that information? A lot of it is statistical, but you also have the marketing element of making those statistics appealing for someone to apply to. So, we could go through the list of things that we heard tonight and say, is that something that we want assistance on? So, those are two things that I think it would be beneficial to have some guidance. Both of these people work in the world of what is attracting people that are out looking for jobs to do so.
I think we're charged with figuring that out tonight so we can move forward.
Mhm.
I'm in agreement with everything that you're saying, and I think we should try to move the process forward.
Well, do you want to make a motion?
Well, it's only her and I that have been speaking about it. Does anybody else have another thing?
Well, I think we should decide which of the two groups we would want first
If
of all.
Yeah.
you look at, I think Mass gave you the 5 phases, which are typical of most search processes, and I think what's interesting, they identify in bold the role of the school committee, either by nature of what power is vested in you, and then they identify what they would do. So that would kind of give you a scope of, because if you were going to do it all yourself, you'd be doing all of those components under each of those phases. So if you look at all of those things, that gives you kind of all the elements of the process and what in essence they would be doing for you, and I'm sure it would be very similar for NESDEC, and what you would be doing by nature of your role as school committee, or a combination of, for example, in some instances, as they both indicated, you can do all of the paper screening yourself, or tell them to screen first and give you not the whole list of candidates. But just looking at the phases, you can look at all of those other things and say, do we have the potential within our committee and the time to do all of that? Or are we better off to be served by outsourcing all of it? It's really, again, a decision that as a committee member, but I think looking at those 5 phases.
And in
Shows
Jamie's
all of the
motion, you
elements of
can
it.
use, if you prefer MASC, then you make the motion with the MASC. If it carries, then we have that.
Okay.
So you make up the motion you want. Do you want to pay the fee? Do you want to just go to them for their services, their free services? If you want to make a motion, you can.
Can I say something first?
You certainly can.
I think that I feel like we're talking that we do not want to do the whole thing. We're not paying for the whole thing. So if we're not paying for the whole thing, I think we need to think about if we're gonna do some parts of it, we don't wanna do some parts through one company and then go and ask MASC all the other questions. Like, I'd rather just be dealing with MASC all the
Well,
time.
that's why I said if she's going to put what she wants in her motion, MASC or NESDEC. And then that's who we're going to deal with if the motion carries.
I want to say that
Uh,
your processes, I'm sorry not to have a side conversation, but I thought it was important to ask Mrs. Reed if there were things that she felt in the 2 processes that you felt that we could have used more help with or more assistance with. So, we ended up at the end of the last one, really,
I
committing a lot of time. With the first search, when we were replacing the superintendent Gawain, it was all the initial processes, and then it was going out and doing site visits as well. So this was a different process because we were looking for an interim situation.
Okay, so I'm gonna take it another step. Sandy, when we did the interim search, we went on to School Spring. I wasn't on that first committee for the search for Gilrain and getting Mr. Desto. But who did that portion of it, that first? Was it you, or was it the committee that did a search on? Because, I mean, I didn't think it was a big, and maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't think it was a big deal to go on to School Spring, because we had already knew what we were looking for, sort of. And that's why we went through and who we were gonna take, but
I remember,
The
anyway,
rest of
they did
this.
have the applications, and if any school committee member wanted to look at them, they did. We went to the office, because at that time, I don't know if School Spring was available to us, but now it is. But we all looked at the applications, and I think the committee,
We didn't, on this, just on my participation, when we did the full search for
Right.
our superintendent 4 years ago, we were only presented with the 4 candidates that had been selected to
were,
come before the
right.
committee. So we never saw the applications.
but if you
For
wanted
everyone
to,
else.
Elaine, you could have.
But that again is a learning process, which is the reason why I chose to serve on it the
That's
second
what
time.
we're gonna
so
have
that
to
I'd see it all.
determine.
Yeah.
That,
Those
I
will be
think,
determined.
my opinion, I think the school committee has the right to look at the applications. But then the search committee screened them for us
right.
and gave us what we
Correct.
wanted. We wanted 4 or 5 candidates at that time, plus we included the internal candidates, as Kathy mentioned at our last meeting. We're going to have the internal candidates, they're going to be finalists. So we'll have to determine that again.
Well, and one of the things that we were just discussing, even if we had somebody else do all the screening, there were superintendents that their licenses had expired that we didn't know about until. we
Right,
d-
that's right.
So if we were to go with somebody, they could just get through that. And I mean, it's not that it's tough to spend money when we're trying to save money, but this is time-consuming, and nobody here can be that person.
Could I add one thing to what you said? Because I think it's an important point. I think when you're doing a search for the person who will lead this district, who will lead a $55 million budget and a staff of 500 to 600 people, and you want to weigh the total cost, which is somewhere between a little under 10,000 to say 13,000 plus, to the potential benefit, the risk if you don't. The risk in that you get a candidate down the road who, before the end of the 3-year contract, you need to buy out. Because you didn't have the opportunity to have maybe some information that is shared oftentimes behind the scenes, that can be shared, but you just never had. So I think from the large sense, is it money well spent in the scheme of things for someone who is the leader of a district, for whom you're going to obviously commit to and hope will stay here in the bigger picture? And then also, as you indicated, the time commitment that it would take, and the leadership that you'd need to have on your committee to be able to do all of that. I'm not worried as much about the administrative pieces, but we still always will look to the person who's the school committee leader of this search, as will all of the people outside who will contact you because of questions they have, or the process is, and as you post, you look at some committees who do the searches, and they're constantly, posting their messages, thanking people for participation, all of that. But I think just looking at that total cost over a period of time, divide that up over the life of just a 3-year contract and see what it costs you. In many instances, you're paying that out in some kind of benefit to someone, but just something, food for thought.
Now, this is another food for thought. When you formed the search committee, from my experience, I was on the search committee in Webster, and I wasn't on the school committee, and I was the chair of the search committee. I think we should form the search committee, and then the search committee elects the chair.
I disagree, Pauline.
Yeah,
from what
I'm
happened
just
last
throwing
time.
that out to see how
Sure.
the committee feels, because that's how it was done, it's been done in the past. I never remember electing a chairperson on the school committee. We formed the search committee, and then they did it. This is a
Typically, if you- right.
first. This is a first when you said that for me.
Well,
Because I've
clarifying
been
it-
on it for 32 years, and our search committees, we formed it, they elected the chair. So.
Typically, if you do an internal search, that's what I was saying, not in, if you are going to do the search yourself, run it as a school committee, you would have someone on your committee. If you weren't gonna hire an outside group to do it,
Yeah.
you would ask someone. You could have someone else sit in another
Well,
capacity,
we
but
didn't-
you'd have one member of your school committee kind of overseeing it.
Oh, I mean, we're going to put two, I would say at least two school committee members on the committee. But I would leave it up to the committee to appoint the chair, to elect the chair at that committee, the subcommittee.
But if we go with an outside vendor, we're gonna have to elect that chairperson here now. And then, as the process goes, then you'll have the search committee. But if we're going to hire somebody, we need to put that person in charge now. Not so much wait for
Well,
the
what,
search
in
committee.
charge of the search committee or in charge of
Someone to deal with.
dealing
Someone to
with?
be your liaison, so
Right.
to speak.
Yes.
I'm just gonna throw my
Right, a
perspective.
liaison.
I'm gonna
Yes.
put my perspective out there. The responsibility for hiring the superintendent is the responsibility of the school committee. The search committee, I think
agree.
it's important to be open to all facets and opinions that impact the district. But ultimately, it is the school committee's responsibility, and I think whoever is serving on the school committee, on the subcommittee, one of those people should be elected chair, and if you choose to elect a co-chair from within the school committee, that's fine. But with the last search, the chair that was elected wasn't here for the duration of what needed to happen. And it needed to be, it needs to be followed through by the school committee. That, it's ultimately our responsibility. And that should be something that I think the committee should, consider. They wanna choose to serve on the committee, then we need to be responsible for the process being done. And MASC is a school committee, is a school committee resource. That is, those are the people that we reach out to for questions in resources. So it's just my personal opinion. I think that it's within your jurisdiction, Mrs. O'Coin, when you appoint members to the search committee to appoint one as chair. That is something that you're allowed to do.
Well, I would make a motion that we hire MASC to start the process. I think we should vote on that first.
Okay.
I'll second it, but I
No,
wanna
yeah,
ask questions if I can.
Okay,
I
you
just
can,
wanted to-
it'll be discussion.
Go ahead first.
When I read the cost proposal page of the MASC, there's like ABC section, and it says 9,500, for staff, labor, and consulting services. Then there's a host of expenses, and then there's another line for advertising, which is 3,800 to 4,000. I guess I'm questioning, and I don't know that anybody here even knows the answer. Are we adding all of this together to make a total, or is 9,500 cover all of, if we choose to do the consulting services, does that 9,500 cover the advertising and cover the other services?
He said he would do a lot of things for free. I
Free.
don't know what, I wrote down some of them, but I don't know if that's all of them.
Well,
I
the additional advertising, I could add that 38 to 4,000 is for print. So if you wanted
Okay,
to go
so
in
if we
Education Week, which typically, again, if you read it, he's right, you're gonna see one or two superintendents from across the country, because it's so expensive.
Okay.
The same thing with the Boston Globe, those ads, very small, were running probably $5,000.
Okay.
So typically, that doesn't happen, and so that cost would really not be something you would wanna probably invest in for your return.
Fair
That's all I'm
enough.
saying.
I just wanted to
And when
make sure I
asked
knew
him-
the number
right,
that we were
right.
talking about.
And when I asked him the fee, he did say, and he didn't elaborate on it, he said 9,500.
Fair enough, I support that, I support what you had stated, Catherine. I think that that's something
Well,
that
should we ask to put in for cost, and should we put a limit on the price? so once it gets to 9,500, we're done.
Yeah,
I
right.
think you should.
With,
We'll put
should the
that.
cost
Not
not
to
to
exceed.
exceed $9,500.
And I approve that amendment.
Okay,
We'll
you
just start the
second.
I second that amendment.
Why would you start the motion, erase the first motion, and just,
Yeah.
okay, just withdraw your motion, so it's one step.
Okay,
We will hire MASC
what
to
she said.
do the superintendent search with a cost not to exceed $9,500.
Second.
all right. Any more discussion on it? Seeing none, all in
Wait a
favor?
minute, Kathleen.
I
Kathy,
had a question.
Okay, go
Sorry,
ahead.
I don't mean to elongate
No.
this. Well, it's 9,500 for their staff, labor, and consulting services, but then you do have expenses covered under sections 1 and 2 that are not to exceed 2,500. So if you're,
Printing
yes,
the,
Let me see what he says.
Would you be comfortable with saying that we're not necessarily accessing everything that's full
Right.
service, but we're going to come to them with the things that we want assistance for, and we're willing to go up to the cost of
Yeah.
90?
Yeah, that's
9,500.
fine. I just want to
Not
make
to
sure.
exceed.
Not to
We're
exceed
not going to
9,500.
exceed.
Kathy,
guess-
some of those services, if some of your candidates are finalists or out of state, sometimes you'll use Mass to do some of the, actually visit the site and do some of that and report back. So that could be part of that when you look at that. There's also, of course,
Okay.
going to be travel here for them to do focus groups and that, which may be, again, dependent on how far it is from the location, maybe a little bit of a cost. That's why they say it could be to a maximum of 1,500.
So if you were to include that, you're going up to possibly $11,000.
It's 12.
I would think for 10,000, not to exceed 10,000, you're probably gonna be good. I mean, the ones that I've seen are, the range is, the range is somewhere between,
Well,
know.
we should, I think we should tell them, this is what we're going to spend.
yeah.
What
They'll-
will
and
you
they'll
do,
work
we'll do
with
the
it.
other part. I mean,
Right.
I don't think, if he's coming out here to do focus groups, we can do that online. He said the focus groups in
Yes.
person
Yeah.
did nothing, it was all online, so that costs
I
nothing.
would stay with the
I'm sticking with 9,500, because
9,500.
that's the figure he gave us.
And that's the figure he gave
I'm gonna,
us.
and if something happens, you can always come back and.
Right. Jamie?
I'll go with if something happens, he can always come back and
Right.
ask for more, but I don't think we should go in saying we want less than what they're gonna offer.
Right.
No, but
For
no.
9,500, I
No.
think we say, you showed us these 5 phases and what you're gonna provide to us.
Right.
And if there's other services that we request and we'd like a
Well, you can
community
come back and-
profile,
yeah.
we're gonna ask you, maybe that's a free service that's included in our 9,500. But I don't think we should say, I think we should be very careful not to
Say
tell
we
them.
want to pay
Well,
more.
we wanna pick and choose off your list. We are asking you to do this for us, and if you tell us it costs more than what we allotted, we could always come back to this group and discuss it, but we expect these 5 phases to be carried out as you said.
I have another one. Sorry, through the chair to Mr. Matthew. Where are we going to be getting this money from?
Well, we don't have a line item specific to this, so it would have, the budget would have to be covered through the contingency budget.
And we have enough to do that?
We have 100,000 to start the year. This is the first, one of the first things that would be absolutely committed from there. But there has been, talk about, capital planning, perhaps some seed money coming from there, as well as maybe a safety study. maybe
Don't we have some money
coming
left
from there.
over from the superintendent's salary that would kind of balance off
Well,
that?
that's all, that was all
That was
included.
all included.
All-
I know,
all
but we
in on
spent
the-
all 136,000 on those, I thought some of that was coming from circuit breakers and so forth.
Indeed, the balance was covered by circuit breaker, but again, from that 137,000, the committee had committed 45,000 back in June for the speech and language pathologists. So that left less than 100,000 total to cover the
So
years.
that's completely gone.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Now, I think also we should appoint someone to be the go-to person to MASC from this committee.
Who would want to do that?
Mrs. Rabbit has a good working relationship with
know.
them. I'm not being sarcastic
No.
either. You know all the people
So
down
you'll
there.
be
I would
the
I would nominate-
liaison.
Yeah, you can appoint her, Paula, if she would take it.
Yes, I am.
You gonna take it?
Are you willing to do it?
Okay, so serving as chair or serving as liaison?
Well, one leads to the next.
Yeah.
No, you, honestly, Mrs. Rabbit, you know all the
Yes.
players down there.
Right.
Sure.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you,
And-
Mrs. Rabbit.
Someone's buying my beer.
Would you like us to call Glenn?
On the record.
And
Is that a condition?
I've had second thoughts. I will appoint you the chair of the search committee because I think you'll do a good job and you want it, right?
Not necessarily, Mrs. O'Coin, but I would more than happy to
Okay, so we've got the chair
work
and then
on
we'll
behalf
get
of my
the,
fellow colleagues here.
Thank you, Mrs. Rabbit.
and then we'll get the search committee on, check Elaine to see what we had for the search committee last time, how many administrators, how many
All right.
teachers, faculty.
So I'll work with Dr. Nash to put together that and then,
Right.
Contact
Okay.
Mr. Kuchar.
And then we had someone, I think we had a citizen too, so.
I know
check
that, I know, and I'm sure Mrs. Terry had alluded to this earlier, that there are citizens that have reached out that want to be part of the
And,
search, so.
have we decided how many are going to, decide how many school committee members? I mean, we shouldn't have more than
You can't
three.
have more than three, right?
No.
I think
Well, we
I think we
could
should wait and see
because
what
we
the-
post the
I
meetings,
think we
but
should wait and
three,
let Mrs.
yeah.
Rabbit talk to
Yeah.
Right,
Glenn
I
about all that
think once
stuff.
you have a conversation with Glenn, he
He
can
might give
kind
you
of talk to you
suggestions and
about
stuff.
some of the,
Yeah.
you know, representation on your earlier committees.
Yeah.
And how, whether or not you want 3 members
Or
or
two
all the way
members,
through,
or we'll
whatever.
let you decide.
Okay,
to them.
we'll pull up the history of
Yeah.
not only the interim, but what happened the last time. and-
If you
and
post a meeting, you can, we never do. You can have as many school committee members as you want, but I mean, that's not a good idea. But as long as it's posted, so,
Can I ask one question? Sorry.
Yeah.
Are we expecting Mr. Kuchar to tell us a rough, what they would guide us to for how many members of the public
Yeah.
and how many administrative staff?
He will give you examples of whatever questions you have, you know, in his past experience, you know, if you ask, what's the typical composition of the first committee that does the initial interviews? Typically, is that your broader-based committee with less representation? What does it look like? And you can make the decision as to how you want to do that. If you designate someone as the chair already, then basically you're saying,
Take
this is your decision on behalf of us, so that that person doesn't have to keep coming back to the committee, other than to obviously keep you informed about the process and the way it has gone. But they'll
Having buyer's remorse.
he'll give you all kinds of options and scenarios of how districts, and then you want to make sure it fits the needs of this district, you know, and the constituency and the involvement. Sometimes you'll put something out online, you want to quickly establish a link under the school committee to inform them that you've hired Mass, that we have established this, that Mrs. Rabbit is the chair, and that maybe initially you are soliciting once you find out where you want people, you're gonna be soliciting some members, and you're gonna tell them exactly what your membership of this portion of the phase is gonna look like for interviews, and keep them informed along the way as to the process.
I more ask because what if we get too many members of the public that are interested? And then how will Mrs. Rabbit be tasked with deciding yes or no? Or,
you have to just decide as the chair who you would think best fit, because she may get more.
I might be drawing names from a hat.
I just was
Yeah, but you
trying
just-
to air that out for you now.
And
So like, if
Glenn-
we need
Glenn
to have a
can give you
conversation.
Yeah,
some,
because
Mr.
we've been
Kuchar
through
can-
it before. You just, whoever you choose, that's the person.
Yeah. Mr. Kuchar could tell you some of the ways that you've done it.
Right.
I would suggest that you look, surprisingly, some school committees have policies that actually say what a committee must look like. I can tell you that Oxford had a policy that already predetermined the committee makeup, something that I had not seen before. And they also had a policy for what a search would look like for a principal. So I don't know that you have it, but I would just suggest maybe Sandy has a unbelievable knowledge of policy, so she might tell you yes or no. But other than that, you really want to, you know, guide your questions through your chair of your committee, research committee, and if you say, gee, I'm thinking we should have this, then certainly she's got the ability to talk with Mask, anyone on Mask, including Glenn. I'm assuming Glenn will probably do the search, unless he has someone else, but generally he's doing most of the searches, I believe, but I don't know for sure. But we'll notify them, and on behalf of Mrs. Rabbit wants us to, we'll notify them tomorrow and give them contact information for you to reach out to you and start having those discussions. And maybe at our next meeting, may be able to have, kind of some timelines in place as to how, what, and the committee may have some comments about that.
And can I add one more thing?
Go ahead.
Perhaps the secondary person on the school committee could help you if you got stuck like that.
It became very valuable to have multiple people that were able to jump in, because it is a lot of
Maybe you'd
work.
want the co-chair.
Right, so I know Mrs. Antossi is not here, but I think it would be helpful to
Right.
maybe see who else wants to
Right, I'm not going to do it until you come with the,
come back.
come back to me and
Okay.
tell me how many,
Okay.
what your search committee is going to consist of.
All right, Mrs.
Okay.
Sullivan.
So anything else before we go on to the next? Okay. Okay, E, and I did tell Dr. Nash to put this on, consideration to amend district policy. It's GCG, right? Because it says F on the agenda, but it's GCG.
Yes, I'm sorry, that was-
Substitute, that's okay,
me.
substitute teachers discussion, and a vote may be required if you all decide it's okay to revise it. And simply, I put this on because we did waive a policy with the extended substitute teacher, the chemistry teacher. Then we had to, then someone came and asked us if their child or children could stay in the school system. So I did make revisions, but we'll discuss it to see if anyone objects to it, or we shouldn't revise it at this time. Who wants to start on that?
Well, I will, because the part that we were discussing last meeting was about a extended substitute teacher, and we had in parentheses IEs, 8 sick days, 2 personal days, and health benefits, and then we stopped it there. And IE means this is it, you can't add anything else, as opposed to EG means these are examples, you can add other stuff, but
Right.
IE, this is it. And I think
Right.
the problem is that when the contract added that language about letting parents bring their kids to the school, we didn't adjust it here. So I think that we're really making it align with the other benefits of a teacher. So I think the IE was fine until we added more benefits to the staff in their contract, that we should have looked at this at that time. No one ever thought of that. It just passed through the cracks, so to speak.
All right, go ahead.
If I can, I'd actually like to suggest that we table this and put this on the first meeting of the policy subcommittee for this reason. When I looked at this, the questions that came to me is that this is a benefit that we are changing for classification of staff, but it's not a benefit that's afforded to other people. So the benefit, this particular benefit about enrolling children if you live outside the district is specific to the teacher contract. It's not in the contracts for our superintendent or our administrators and any of our support staff. And I think if we're really looking to Mrs. Cabala's point, look at making sure we're looking at every element and not just one thing, we should put this in the forum where we can be looking at all of the other documents relating to this, and then coming back and saying that if we're making this change, we have looked not only at policy, we've looked at contract language, we've looked at the impact to the district in relating to offering this as a benefit. I don't think it's a simple, let's just fix this particular language in this particular situation, because we're not looking at the overall picture of the issue.
Well, to go back to your point, when that contract language was proposed, and I remember distinctly saying in executive session, since I said it, I'll say it, this does not apply to anybody else, is that fair? Because we were doing the non-teaching people at the same
Correct.
time, and the response was, we're gonna do this for now. So this is
Correct.
still a teacher, this is still a faculty
Right.
member, is a
And I
teacher. This
I
is
would
not
like
one of the other
a
divisions.
vote on this, whether we're going to revise it or not, from the whole committee, because I'm still, I would like to see this amendment go through this evening.
I guess my point of view is, nothing's to say, Elaine, that we can't approve this tonight, and then when you're going through the policies, you can review it to the greater extent that you'd like to. I know it seems a little unorthodox, but it's still, we were a very split board at our last meeting, and this provides some of the people that didn't support that the opportunity to maybe provide something for that individual for that specific situation that couldn't have been provided in their minds that night.
So I'm going to, not to banter, but through the chair. This is what I have a problem with, and I know Mrs. Antosha spoke to this as well. We keep putting ourselves in a situation that we change and amend policy for a specific individual, for a specific person. And it defeats the purposes of having policy. So I will just share with you that I think that this is, I understand that the board is split on this, and it was a 3-3 decision. We have a member here tonight that had a very strong opinion that's not here to vote. So I have a problem with it being here and it not being a full board, because if you're looking to change an opinion, then it should be the full board opinion. I think that there needs to be a further look at this. If you look at the contract language, and when this was put in place, this was put in place at a very specific time, and the language in the teacher contract specifically says it's not just a guarantee that if somebody asks, they're going to be allowed to do this. The contract language talks about the number and location of openings under this section will be set by the school committee by May 1st of the preceding school year. So it wasn't put out that it was a carte blanche, that if an employee wants to put their children in the district, we're just going to accept them. There was a process put into the contract that we were going to put ourselves in a position that we were going to be analyzing where this was effective. So this particular case aside, one of the reasons why I have difficulty with this as an employment substitute is this is not a permanent staff member. So if we were to create an option for someone to come in a temporary position to move their children in, what happens if their employment is not continued with the district?
That was addressed in the minutes, that's why I corrected the
Yes.
minutes tonight. If the teacher leaves, even if a full-time staff member retired, went to Worcester next week, the kids are out in June.
Right.
And nobody's gonna.
But here's my point. Without going through all of the documentation and ensuring that that language is in all of these places, it's not here in the policy. You made a specific language to that particular person, but you're asking us to change policy to allow this to happen, but we're not looking at every element of this. And that's where I have a problem with putting this in a first reading and saying that we're moving forward and going to a second reading without putting this in the place to have this thoroughly looked at in all elements of how it's impacted. I personally have a problem with putting this benefit out to teachers only and not looking to extend this benefit to other.
I brought that up in negotiations, and we said
But-
at that time we couldn't, because the timing wasn't the same year.
Okay, but that was 2 years ago, and this is now, and if we want to reconsider it, this is the time to reconsider it.
Now, there's two elements we wanted to change this evening. One is the step and scale, because we had to waive that, the policy for that, and then we had to waive for the extended substitute. So there's two here. And then I disagree about the full committee. We have our meetings the second Wednesday of the month and the 4th. If we have something to do and it's on the agenda, we're not going to say, well, we have to wait for the next to see if everybody's going to be here. Because how do you know? Maybe you won't be here and we won't have a full committee again. I would like a motion on this. If it's defeated, fine. If we win, fine.
I
That's
just want
my
to reiterate
feeling.
why I think it should be changed, is because we listed the other benefits that a teacher gets. And I'll repeat what I said at the beginning, when we added that new feature in the
Right.
new contract, we never looked at this. It was our fault for not changing it back then to be in line with the contract, because every other benefit they get the sick leave, they get the personal days, they get all the health. We never added this in when it was changed, when we should have, and that's all, who wants to take the fault, there's nobody to blame, it's just there was an oversight, and it never came to call until now, that's why it's being brought up now.
Kathy?
I have a question then. So I hear what you're saying, Ms. Rabbit, that, you know, our contract says something different than exactly what we're saying in our policies. So, I mean, I would feel more comfortable if you changed the IE to an EG and leave out what you're exactly saying so that we're more in line with what our contract's saying. Do you know what I mean? So, because now you're saying that you're definitely allowing it, where our teacher contract is saying allowing it if there's room available, correct? I don't know.
Yes, it does, you have to be told by May 1st.
I'm still struggling with the need to do this tonight and not putting this in the policy committee and allowing all of those things that you're bringing up. Time to be considered and come back to the full committee with all of the ramifications of changing IE to EG, to having it, not having it, to how it matches the contract language or not matching the contract language. So I just,
As
you know,
Jamie did
I have difficulty with, you know, with not being happy with the results of a vote and bringing it back in to look at it
You can,
again.
though. You're on the policy committee, and if you want to bring it back later, you can. But I think this evening, we should be voting on it.
Can I just have, nowhere in here does it say anything what Catherine brought up about if they don't work here next year, their
So
children
it says
leave
the
in
teacher,
June.
and they wouldn't be a teacher, so the
They
contract
wouldn't
is
be a
null and
teacher.
void, so to speak. That's why I had to put into the minutes, because I made that point last meeting. Any
But in
teacher that
this,
leaves
in
the
this
district, that kid has
policy,
to
it
leave.
should say that. It should say that, because I mean, we're changing stuff right now. Who's to say somebody's not gonna come back and fight that? And now, and we might not even be on the board. So I think the things that we're bringing up need to be put into this policy.
It says the agreement between the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee. This was copied almost verbatim right out of the contract, this here.
So just as a
So, I mean, the teachers have to abide by it. If they leave, then their
No longer
children,
employment,
they're no
yeah.
longer employed. This is our policy for our district. They're no
Let's be
longer under
truthful,
the
an
policy.
extended employee substitute knows they're only gonna be for 1 year, not gonna bring their kids
Right.
here for 1 year and then leave the next year. This particular, let's be truthful, we're talking about the case of the person who has
Right.
3 children here. From all indications, he probably would be hired full-time, or he would not be taking his kids out of one school for a year and then making them move back. So we're doing this because there was a person who came to us last meeting and asked if we'd consider it. At that time, we looked at the part, we said no, because it was a no vote. But now, I still go back to the IE, we should have put it in there. I think we were allowing that for extended employment, we just never put it into writing. And now we're trying to fix it wrong. We can go on.
Yeah, the IE should be in there.
It
The
should
only
because-
Yeah,
caution
it
I
should
would
be
say
in
by
there.
changing from IE to EG is there are some other benefits that teachers get,
Yeah.
for example.
Right, so
You know,
IE
additional,
limited.
so you
Right.
would want to specify.
Because they could
Right.
get course
There are
reimbursement.
additional-
Right,
Right,
We don't
right.
want that
And
stuff.
so that's why we put in the IE.
You don't want to, we don't want a course reimbursement allowed.
No, so
But
that's
will
why
allow
we
the
have
cost
the
of a child
IE.
to come.
Let me just
Kathy,
say, can I just throw this out, it never came up, by bringing those 3 children in, we will make $30,000 plus, won't we? Because they are counted as real students in our district as opposed to school choice. It's not a money issue, but to address your question, we are making money by bringing students in.
We're
because
not
they are
losing.
They're considered full-time enrolled students, not school choice, so they are better than a school choice for money. I'm just throwing that because you brought up the money part. It is a financial benefit.
Right, because you had said taxes.
How do you,
That's how, correct, Mr. Matthew, they're considered full-time October 1st enrollment students, we were told that before, is that still true?
Yes, that is indeed the case as it relates to the foundation enrollment and the foundation budget that's generated. We're not going to literally receive a check for $30,000,
No.
I know that, but I mean,
nor will
It's
we
still
actually
added in
receive
there.
$30,000 more in funding, because from the state's perspective, and I'll remind the committee of Mr. Abrams' report last year, when we were looking at the override, where he indicated the state thinks that they're overpaying us by about $2 million, based on the Chapter 70 formula and the hold harmless piece. So, again, yes, they do truly count for full enrollment in the foundation budget, but per the foundation budget, the state thinks they're overpaying us
But
currently.
there's
So
still money.
point of clarification, there is no way that this policy, if you move forward with this and there's a
By
positive
October
vote, there's
1st.
no way that this policy is going to move forward, that any incoming students are going to be enrolled for our October 1 count. So if we take these 3 students in, they're not impacting our budget right now because they're not going to be here on October 1. Okay, so these would be students that would be coming in here with no financial benefit. All right, so I need to make that point clear.
I guess I'd like to go to your point about Miss Antossi not being here. She specifically said her challenge with this is that we continue to not support the policy that we have forth. And then that comment was, change the policy, and I will consider that not wavering from the policy. We're trying to make good on the conversation that what occurred, and I can appreciate that you'd like to investigate it further. Possibly that could have happened before tonight at this meeting.
There's no point in, and I'm gonna be very honest, there's no point in sitting down and investing, and I said, the last time that the district had a full review of policies was in 2012, all right? And it was a very lengthy process that we went over a year. We have not done that since then. I'll be very honest with you, and Mrs. Antossi communicated this to me, and I feel the exact same way. I have no interest in sitting down and investing a tremendous amount of my own personal time going through and developing policies that are meaningless, okay? And if we're sitting here and we're writing policies and we're going to turn around and ignore them for a particular circumstance that I don't feel is beneficial in this particular situation, then it's not timely. It's just not a good investment of my time, okay?
We
So
have
we're-
employees, Elaine, and let's try to treat them fairly. And I think right now, this policy should be changed. We have a person that wanted to bring their kids in, likes, he'll be hired next year. If
That's
need be.
presumptive, but that's extremely
And so
presumptive.
I think we've had enough discussion. Do I have a motion to approve this revision? We're not going to do a first reading or a second reading. We're just approving the changes, and then we have to have the first and second reading.
Wait, I'm sorry, I don't understand.
I-
Like, point of clarification, because I don't understand the flow of how we're doing this.
Okay. Does the majority of the committee want to change a policy? That's
Okay,
what
so
the
that
motion is
happens.
on.
Is this considered the
This
first?
is not
So then we
considered a
have 2 more
first
meetings?
reading. This is not considered, right.
Okay, so just a
It's,
question.
does the committee want to approve this policy? If the committee wants to approve the policy, then we can have a first reading this evening. But I want to know if the majority want to revise the policy. That's what I want the motion for, not a first reading. If you all, if we have the majority that want to revise it, then we can have a first reading because we have the policy in front of us.
I'll make a motion that we revise policy GB to be in, well, I won't say why, but I'll just,
Second, and now
Okay.
during discussion, all this vote is saying is that we'd like to revise
Yes,
it.
yes.
It doesn't mean this is going to be what the wording is.
It's going to, this is the policy with the revisions, and that's what Kathy made the motion. Do you agree on the revisions?
Oh, I thought I understood it to be that we were agreeing to revise this policy, and then if we
We
did
have the
a,
revisions.
but then if we did a first reading, that would be a separate point of order.
Right, but I mean, I just want to know if the majority are going to accept the
Is
revision.
that what your motion was? I thought your
Mine was
motion
just to look at the revision, maybe we don't
look at
want
the
this
revision.
revision, maybe we wanted to change some language.
Okay.
The point is to bring the
Yeah.
policy up for discussion, basically,
Right.
what it is. This may not be the first reading if we want to change, if you don't like what's actually
If
here,
you
you
want,
might
you
want something
can
else.
change the revision again. We were,
This is just to bring it up for revision. This may not be the revision. Isn't that basically what I'm saying?
That's
Yeah.
what that's what I
Yeah.
was saying.
and then we can discuss it to see
First,
what
we
the
have to vote and see
revision
if-
is, once we get the vote on, are we
So
going to
we have that.
revise
This
it?
is just to revise policy GCG.
Okay? Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. Any more discussion on it?
Yes,
Okay.
because this vote that we're taking right now is to say that we want to revise this,
Right.
not that we're taking this
No,
language.
and then we'll discuss it again.
And then
at
that
some-
is it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I want, clarification.
Any other discussion?
A point of clarification, so what you're asking for is a vote right now saying that you're interested in revising the policy. It's not to accept the language that's been proposed and to take a vote that this language is going to go into first reading.
No, it's just to say, no, this is not going to be necessarily the first reading. That's not part of the motion. The motion is just to revise the policy. Maybe we want to change it in the next meeting, have a different first reading or something. This is just to look at the policy, basically.
That's all you want? And are we going to look at it after
Well,
we
first we have
get
to
the
decide,
vote?
well,
Let's
maybe
get
we
the
want to
vote.
keep the language, maybe we don't.
Okay. We'll do it that way. Any other questions? Okay, all right, all in favor? Okay, opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain, okay. So 5-1. And so do you want to make changes to it this evening? And then we can have a first reading and see if it passes.
I feel more comfortable. We have a policy subcommittee for a reason. And I do think we need to think about all the different facets of the implications of the policy. I understand that we have a staff member that, is still hoping, and I get that. But I do think that we need to be considerate of our policies and our procedures.
Okay, anyone else?
I've spoke a lot on this already. I feel like
Okay.
everybody here knows.
Do you like the policy the way it's written, or any changes? Catherine, any changes to this, if you?
Well, there was one other, had nothing to do with that. It's the previous number 2, with the superintendent may place a certified employee on the, right, that's for the chemistry teacher type example. I don't like the word may, because that means the superintendent doesn't have to do it. I think if a person comes in, it should be on step 8. It's not a question of may, the superintendent will place a certified employee on the step. That gives the superintendent, whoever he or she may be, too much leeway. If a person has worked 8 years someplace else and comes in here, they automatically should put on steps 9. So I would change that word to will.
But can I
Yep, sure,
comment
sure.
through the chair? If we don't have the financial base to do that, then we have to give the superintendent the authority to make that decision, because we may not have the funds to support that other step.
Which is why it needs to be discussed more. Just for clarification, just to make sure that it's coinciding with everything else that we have going on. And that's my,
Okay. So Kathy, we'll leave the may in for now. Do I have a motion to accept this as a first reading? If I don't, then it's defeated. with the May in as Dr. Nash had changed it, because I think I had Will and you changed it to May.
Well, I think
So-
there are a couple of reasons why, if I might
Yeah,
speak.
go ahead.
One is that there are absolutely times when, I think the committee saw that, when there would be a need to place someone in extenuating circumstances such as a chemistry teacher. One, because the nature of the position. Two, because of the risk that he was taking in leaving a permanent position to come to an interim position, if you will, and to acknowledge that he had 17 years. So, but the second, to answer the second piece of that, so I think there are times, and therefore using may gives superintendent that opportunity to make that decision. There are other times when if you lock the superintendent's hands then, and you happen to have a year where there are a series of people who are out for an entire year, you are potentially putting the district at risk for that cost. Because if you compare, and it happens to be, let's just say it's an OT who's out, position we can't get, a psychologist, position we can't get, very, very difficult, then you must give them that salary that they would get if they were hired permanently and put on the appropriate step. And it just may not have, and we may not have all the funds. So that leeway, I mean, gives the superintendent some flexibility to do that. Not a typical language that you will even find in teacher contracts, where there are times when there's usually a language that gives a superintendent a leeway to put someone on a scale 5 years above or below in most instances. So it's not a typical language, and I see Kevin nodding his head, that it happens. And you do that in some situations. You always do it in conversation with your director of finance and operations to say, if I'm going to do this, which is what we did with the chemistry position, and having the conversation with the high school principal and knowing the difficulty of that position. So just may gives us, not must, doesn't lock us in. So that was the rationale behind that.
Okay, so do I have a motion, and we will leave the May in, and accept this as the first reading?
Can I ask a question about first reading, second reading? If we accept this as the first reading and a different board makeup occurs just because of absences or such, the next
It
meeting.
can be defeated on the
Well,
second.
the second reading, if there's a group that decides we need to change the wording, then we're going back to a first reading, right? That's how that works.
Yes, that's how it
Yes,
works.
goes
Yeah.
back to the first reading.
And question to the chair, are we allowed to send it back to committee? Or do you need a motion to
Well,
send it back to committee?
Yeah. First of all, if it is accepted as the first reading, as she said, next time at a second, if there's more discussion, there's always discussion, and you want to change some of the words, fine. And we'll be voting on it to approve it. And if you don't, then you don't approve it.
I think the motion on the floor, you'd have to either not have a second on that motion,
Right.
and then propose a new motion, which is the one that you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. So, do I have a motion?
I'll throw it out there just to see, I'll make this the first reading.
Okay. Do I have a second? Okay. Any more discussion on it? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's no vote. 3-3.
Can I make a motion?
Go ahead.
I make a motion that we send this policy to the committee.
Second.
Well, we did vote to
It's gonna
revise
be in
it.
the committee.
What, do you mean, do it like first?
As their first agenda item?
Which, are you proposing that they come back with a revised
Well, we would be
policy
coming,
at
we
our
would be
next
coming
meeting?
back in the timeframe that we've delineated. So if we meet in October the 11th, we would take that up and then come back, I think, in November.
So it still wouldn't make it for October. Are you proposing to do it for the next meeting?
I don't.
They're going to revise it anyway. It didn't pass right
Was
now.
it the first thing to be revised?
No, they were just alphabetical order.
But my point is, they won't have that revised to come back to the
Back
to
October
us,
10th meeting. It will get pushed to October 24th at best.
Is the committee able to meet before then to
I
look
think
at
the
that
11th
policy?
was the date. I haven't checked my calendar, but I think you said the 9th or the 11th. Yeah, I know that I'm not, the 9th doesn't work, but I think the 11th probably will.
But our next meeting is the 10th, so then.
Okay.
So what's your motion?
My motion would be to move this policy to the committee for, I don't know how to say that.
Review.
There's no
For first
point.
review, like for them to
first
look
policy.
at, the first policy to be reviewed
Any date that they should,
at the first meeting.
okay. Do you have a any?
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
I guess my discussion is, if it's possible to meet before the 10th and get us a policy, even if this is the only one that you look at in that meeting, it would be beneficial to the split part of the board here that feels extremely strongly about this policy. And I can appreciate that it's hard to schedule, believe me, I feel it too, but I feel like this is something that we're very split on, and we have an employee that has approached us about this. It's not something that's sitting for an unextended period of time. There is a person waiting on the other end of this.
Yeah. And we feel passionate about this.
I can't speak for the two members, but I certainly can look at my schedule, and if it works out for the two board members, then.
Thank you.
Just to fill in, Mrs. Antosi's out of the country. I did reach out to her today to say if there's dates available for the policy subcommittee. When are you available? What are your first dates that you're available? And she proposed October 9th and October 11th. So I'm going off of that's her first availability. So I don't know that we can set a date earlier than that because she's not here to answer that, and we're not meeting until October 10th. So I did try to get that information so that we could set a date tonight.
I guess I just wanted to provide the direction that I feel like this committee is looking to have it done before our next meeting.
It doesn't sound like it's going to
I
be.
still wanted to say it.
No, I
Thank you.
appreciate that, but then, the onus is on me, and I don't feel that I want to be put in that position to meet independently to determine a policy for the district.
Well, with our superintendent,
But I don't feel comfortable serving in that role.
Any more discussion? So all in favor? Okay, motion carries, it's unanimous. Okay. Next is consideration to appoint delegate, MASC, MASS. I think we're going to table this one until the full committee is here. And then Kathy had expressed an interest, and, but you're not sure that,
I have been granted
yeah.
by my.
And Jamie, do you have an interest in being the delegate too?
we looked it up while we were talking
Oh.
here, and we saw that you can do a delegate and then appoint an alternate
Yeah.
in case one of our
Right,
lives
right.
changed in that period of time.
Yeah.
And we both felt like
You both want to
we
be
would
the
be willing
delegates?
to
Good.
do that.
And do you know you both can go into the meeting too? Only one can vote.
Okay.
So you can deliberate, so both of you, okay? And if you can't,
Right,
then
I don't
it's just Jamie, because she's not sure yet.
Mhm.
Okay? So Jamie, and,
I
or
can
do
be
you
the
want to
alternate.
wait until next?
I don't mind, I'll be the alternate.
Okay.
It's fine, because you know you're definitely going, right?
I know I definitely can go. How's that?
Okay, Jamie, we'll appoint you, and then Kathy will be the alternate.
Okay.
Okay. And consideration of requests
Do you-
for,
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
What?
Do you want to table that, or do you want to take a vote now?
well, I can just
Okay.
appoint them.
All
I don't have to really vote.
We are voting.
Yeah, do you want to
We
vote
already
too?
voted that.
Okay.
I'm
right.
going to vote for Mrs. Terry to be the delegate and Mrs. Carmichael to be the alternate to the MASS joint conference in November.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Thank you. Do we vote?
Sure.
It'll be fun.
If I can go.
Yeah, hopefully you will.
Consideration of requests for home instruction?
Right. I
Dr.
received
Nash?
2 requests. My blank one, I was holding, that's why that line is there, because I thought I would be receiving some more, so I held, and then I didn't go back to change that, so I apologize, but we did receive 2 additional homeschooling requests from families, again, consistent with the practice. I won't be reading the names aloud. One is at grade 3. Student currently would be at grade 3, one at grade 4, so I would ask that you would approve those.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. It's unanimous. Next meeting dates, school committee meetings, Wednesday, October 10th, Shepherd Hill Regional High School at 7 p.m. Wednesday, October 24th, Charlton Middle School, 7 p.m. Budget and Finance Subcommittee, Wednesday, October 10th, at Shepherd Hill Regional High School, 5 p.m. Future agenda items, October 10th, MCAS results, general education and special education overview, proposal for reorganization timeline and process, October 24th, MCAS principals report. Anything else added?
An update on what we discussed about the MASC.
Okay,
We should be voting on proposals for the resolutions for the conference.
okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Usually we get copies of that besides our book, but in case some people didn't get a book.
And
We can have
one
mine
of those meetings will be the policy we discussed tonight brought forth for first reading.
Okay,
Mrs. Oakley?
Jamie, get one.
I can't.
Did you get this book? Okay. That's what they got. That's for the conference.
An update on the central office reorganization.
Is that what that reorganization means down there?
On November.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll have it ready on the 10th, but I'm
Yeah.
working to see.
can be ready the next time.
Yeah, it may be.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, and anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? We're adjourned.